ॐ निरञ्जनं नित्यम् अनन्तरूपं भक्तानुकम्पाधृतविग्रहं वै ईशावतारं परमेशमिड्यं तं रामकृष्णं शिरसा नमामः. Namaste everyone. Shubha Vijaya. Yesterday was Vijaya Dashami, a very auspicious day. Oh, today is Vijaya Dashami, sorry. Yeah, yesterday. And those who are Bengalis or from Bengal, they know it's a day where people will greet the elders and relatives and friends and wish them well. So, and it's nice that on this day we are starting our new course on new study series on the Vedanta lectures of Swami Vivekananda. You can see that unlike previously, we were looking at a PDF, but this time we have put the content into a form of a course on our website. And if you haven't, then you can go and register on our website. Okay. And so when you go there, it'll look something like this. All right. You go to the Yarning Circles, Vedanta NZ members. And if you remember, you have joined a course, then you should be able to hop into that particular group in which there are quite a few things I will just show before we dive into the course. So, of course, these are the courses that I have shared: Mind and Its Care, the Vedanta lectures of Swamiji. We are developing rhythm meditation for well-being. So when you're a member of Vedanta NZ, you get all these things. If there are any events coming, you will see them here. And if you, this is a discussion forum, so this is where we would like to see if people ask questions and we can have some thoughts and things going there. If I share any media or anyone shares, that will be up there. Files and things for additional reading, documents, whatever, it will be there. And all that is there. So that's the whole idea behind getting into a group discussion. And so this is the course, the first one. And I hope I've seen some of you have read through some part of it. Others are starting. You can make this left menu disappear, so the whole thing becomes more readable. And you can make this go into a full screen mode so that the upper parts of the thing that also disappears, much easier to read. We've taken up this study because one of you, I think Shamain, had requested to have a deeper understanding of some of the lectures that are compiled in Swami Vivekananda's Vedanta Voice of Freedom on the subject of Maya. But before we get into the Maya part of it, it's good to have a introduction to the Vedanta, and then we can go deeper into the one of the most fundamental principles of the Vedanta, which is Maya. Difficult to understand. That's why we'll start something with here. And so here we are. This is where the lectures, actually, Swami Vivekananda's talk starts. And what I propose to do is that you do some reading before we start the thing. So rather than me just reading it out to you, we can have some good discussions. And while you're doing that, you can see something here. I'm not sure whether this is from Zoom or within this course, but it helps you to annotate, make lines, draw things, and all that with your this type of things, so that you can customize it for yourself. With that, let us start. So this lecture of Swami Vivekananda was given in 1897, 12th of November, in Lahore, which is now in Pakistan. And it's a very long lecture. The topic is Vedanta. So Swamiji starts With an introduction, he says, two worlds there are in which we live. One is the external, the other the internal. That the human progress has been made from the days of yore, almost in parallel lines along both these worlds. The search began in the external, and men at first wanted to get the answers of all the deep problems from outside nature, the external world. Man wanted to satisfy his thirst for the beautiful and the sublime from all that surrounded him. He wanted to express himself and all that was within him in the language of the concrete, means intangible physical things. And great indeed were the answers he got, most marvelous ideas of God and worship, and most rapturous expressions of the beautiful. So we'll see that uh, those civilizations, especially the Greeks and the Romans in those days, they put so much effort in the external world. And you'll see their painting and the architecture and all those things are most marvelous. Uh, in India, they took put quite a bit of effort in that, but then they made a U-turn and they also developed the internal. So Swamiji says, sublime ideas came from the external world indeed, but the other, opening out the for humanity later, laid out before him a universe yet sublimer. The other means the internal world, yet more beautiful and infinitely more expansive. In the Karma Kanda portion of the Vedas, so the Vedas have got two sections. Kanda means portions, the Karma Kanda and the Jnana Kanda. The earlier sections were rituals and ceremonies and all these yajnas and sacrifices with the aim to go to heaven. All that is part of the Karma Kanda. It culminates in the what is called the Vedanta, Anta part, the last part of the Vedas, which is the Upanishads, Aranyaka, Rahasya, all these different words are there. That is the Jnana Kanda. And Upanishads and Vedanta means that part. So we find the most wonderful ideas of religion inculcated. We find the most wonderful ideas of an overruling creator, preserver, and destroyer of the universe presented before us in the language, sometimes the most soul stirring. Most of you perhaps remember the most wonderful shloka of the Rig Veda Samhita, where you get a description of chaos. How did this whole universe come from? And in the language that is expressed there is it's wonderful. Swamiji in some place has given some translation as he says, darkness covered in darkness. How do you visualize that? That means the immutable, non-manifest is there. Anyway, perhaps the sublimest that has ever been attempted yet. In spite of all this, we find it is only a painting of the sublime outside. We find that yet it is gross and that sometimes something of matter yet clings to it. Yet we find that it is only the expression of the infinite in the language of matter, in the language of the finite. It is the infinite of the muscles and not of the mind. It is the infinite of space and not of thought. So even in this modern age, with all the scientific discoveries, whether they are trying to go out in outer space or blast an atom and go down to these subatomic particles, still the attempt is in the external world. They're trying to find the reality objectively as something external to themselves. So what happens then? So then inward turning, the jnana kanda and the existential question. Therefore, in the second portion of the jnana kanda, we find there is an altogether a different procedure. The first was a search in external nature for the truths of the universe. It was an attempt to get the solution of the deep problems of life from the material world. And and how it was explained, that being whose glory the Himalayas discover, declare, etc. This is a grand idea, but yet it was not grand enough for India. The Indian mind had to fall back, and the research took a different direction altogether. From the external, the search came to the internal, from matter to mind. We see that there arose this cry, Eyam prete vichikitsa manushe astiti eke nayam astiti cheke. Can anyone tell where does this come from? Which Upanishad? Anyone? Which Upanishad? Yes. Yeah, Nachiketa. Which Upanishad?
Katha Upanishad.
Yeah. Yes. So Nachiketa asks this wonderful question when he goes to Yamaraj, and Yamaraj offers him everything of the external world. He wants to make him the emperor, give him a long life, all the things he can enjoy. And yet that young boy had this discrimination, buddhi. He says, you know, no, thank you very much. You keep that Tavaiva Vaha, Tava Nritya Gite. You keep all these Vahanas, elephants and horses, and this dancing in music. I want to understand this answer to this question. What is that? When a man dies, what becomes of him? Some say that he exists. Others say he is gone. Gone means there's nothing exists. Say, O King of Death, what is the truth? So this is that inward turn. And the Upanishads really try to solve the riddle of human being, who we are. Not the riddle of the external world, but the real riddle of the being that we are, the microcosm, not the macrocosm. So, an entirely different procedure that we find here. The Indian mind got all that it be could be had from the external world, but it did not feel satisfied with that. It wanted to search further, to dive into its own soul, and the final answer came. So, while this took them thousands of or hundreds of years, thousands of people, imagine just like modern day scientists are researching and they come to a position and say, okay, probably there's no answer in the direction, let's make a research in a particular different direction. Likewise, we can imagine thousands of people who were researchers, seekers, uh, come to a conclusion that the infinite cannot be manifest in the finite. The permanent cannot be caught in the impermanent. The nameless and formless cannot be caught by or be defined by names and forms. So in our spiritual journey, forget about, okay, this is what happened for many, many centuries ago. That same change also has to come, where we lose interest in the sense we are not seeking for happiness and immortality and knowledge in the external world, but we turn to turn around in the internal world. Somebody's mic is on. So, and that's the beginning of religion. This is called Vairagya, the turning point, discoloring, as they say. That means we color the world and think the world is happiness is there. And with experience, we find there's no happiness. So that is called Vairagya. Raga means color. Vairagya means discoloring. No, it's not what it's only an appearance. It's not the reality. That type of conviction comes only then a person gives up all that external running around for the truth, whether it's running to some place of pilgrimage or some external whatever, and turns inwards, looking, seeking within. In the language of the Kathopanishad, uh, Yamraj says, Avritya Chakshu. Chakshu means eyes, one of the five senses. Avritti means inverted, or inverted means normally it's going outward. Now you turn it inward. That is the starting point if we want to be spiritual. The Upanishads or the Vedanta, or the Aranyakya, or Hasya is the name of this portion of the Vedas. So, there are four words that have been used there. They all mean the same thing. Upanishads. Upa means nearby, close. Ni means totally. Shad means to destroy. So, the word Upanishad means not the book, but the knowledge. When we approach it, we come close by with Shraddha. It totally destroys spiritual ignorance. That's why it's called Upanishad. Vedanta, Veda plus Anta is Vedanta. We have discussed what Veda is. Veda is the sum total of all the spiritual truths discovered by the spiritual seekers, and it's a journey, and it culminates, uh, and that culmination is called the Anta. So Vedanta means the ultimate final truth of the spiritual seekers. And what is that? It says, we I am Atma Brahman. The Atman within me is pure consciousness, and it is one with the universal consciousness behind the whole universe. That man is not a physical being or mental being or an ego, but essentially a spiritual being, eternal, immortal, infinite existence, knowledge, bliss, of the nature of purity, beauty, freedom, and all that. That teaching is the ultimate teaching of the Vedas, and that is the essence. Aham Brahmasmi, I am that infinite being. It's also called Aranyakas. So, Aranyaka means the forest. The people who discovered these truths, where did they find it? Well, many of them had dedicated their whole life and retreated into the seclusion of forests where they could, without any disturbance from the outside world, turn the mind inwards through upasana. Upasana, upa means near, asana means to sit. That means you put your mind close to the reality or the divine that is within us. So they're called upasanas or meditations. And since they practiced, these truths were discovered by such people in the forests, they are called aranyakas. Or it's also called rahasya. Rahasya means secret in the general uh, translation of the word. But the more accurate meaning is that it is sacred, but not secret. Secret is something that you hide and you don't want others to have. Sacred means in the sense that you have to qualify for it to be able to access it. It is there all the time, but you must have the right tools. Just like if you say, there is some bacteria on a piece of on your hand, but it's not accessible unless you develop have a powerful microscope. The bacteria is not hiding from you, it's just our ignorance or our inability of the physical eye to see that is the barrier. And once we remove that limitation with the help of a microscope, then the bacteria can be seen. So the Atman is there in all of us. But because the mind works at a very low sensory level and is directed outwards, and we haven't developed that power of concentration and introversion, therefore, we are not able to experience ourselves as that pure consciousness. And that's why it is sort of hidden there, rahasya. It's not accessible to that. In that way, this is understood. So these four words, Upanishads, Vedanta, Aranyaka, Rahasya, are just different names of what is this Jnana Kanda, this knowledge portion of the Vedas. Okay, so what do we find here? Here we find at once that the religion has got rid of all the external formalities. There's not any ritual and ceremonies, and all the gods and goddesses that were worshipped in the Karma Kanda, they have also disappeared. And the god that's only remaining there is this divine soul of man, his own soul. He finds that all these days he had been worshipping his own self, but he was looking in the mirror and seeing the image, and he thought that image was real, but He was the reality. An image is just a reflection in the mirror. So here we find at once the spiritual things are told not in the language of matter, but in the language of the spirit. The superfine in the language of the superfine. So the supersensuous in the language of the supersensuous. So we cannot express the Atman in material sense. We cannot even express it through words and ideas. It has to be expressed. It cannot be expressed. It is experienced by becoming one with it. So it's not an idea or concept. Remember, we will not understand the Vedanta, the Atman, by reading these lectures or reading the Upanishad. They just give some hint about it. And the words themselves uh, hide the reality. It's the only when all the thoughts are removed, chitta vritti nirodha, and the mind turns inwards and resonates with the Atman within. It is through that resonance that we experience our oneness with the Atman. So keep that in mind. When you're doing puja or japa meditation, we take the support of all the external image and ritual and ceremony. But those are like little props that we are using in the early stages. And when we outgrow them, uh, then we can abandon them because we don't need them anymore. So no more any grossness, no more any grossness attaches to it. No more is there any compromise with things of worldly concern. Brave, bold, brave beyond the conception of the present day stand the giant minds of the sages of the Upanishads, declaring the noblest truths that have ever been preached to humanity without any compromise, without any fear. Imagine for thousands of years ago, the sages had discovered the ultimate truth and proclaimed it in the Vedas. And yet, in this modern age, our so-called great scientists and thinkers are still trying to philosophize and trying to even understand the meaning of what is consciousness, to have a understanding what this consciousness is. And they're always asking this question, what is consciousness? The question itself is defective because you are saying that consciousness can be objectified. It is something is. In the moment you say something is, then you define it. That means you have some definition. Definition means some boundaries. It's caught by words, ideas, and things. And once you've got that is it. Consciousness does not lend itself to be objectified. It is the eternal subject, cannot be objectified. And this was understood long time back, not by one or two, but by the whole spiritual seeking community. And in this modern age, we find most of the people are still in this physical world thinking that consciousness is an emergent property of an organ called the brain, and therefore all the approach to mental well-being and all that is based on that brain mind type of understanding, putting the cart before the horse, according to the Vedic sages. So this Swamiji says, my countrymen, I want to lay before you, means this Vedanta. Even the Jnana Kanda of the Vedas is a vast ocean. Many lives are necessary to understand even a little of it. So Acharya Shankara selected some portions of those Vedas and wrote his commentary on them, and these are the Upanishads. They all sort of talk about the same thing. You don't need to read all of them, but you need to go deep into any one of them, one or two of them, and and uh, and that should be okay. So, but the whole, if you want to understand the whole thing, then you have to know Sanskrit. You must have the access to the commentary. You should have good teachers who can explain things to you. It's a big forest, so to say. And that's why sages like Vivekananda others come who remove all the need for the Sanskrit and everything and explain, as we are reading in simple English, the essence of those teachings. Truly, it has been said of the Upanishads by Ramanuja they, that they form the head, the shoulders, and the crest of the Vedas, and surely enough, the Upanishads have become the Bible of the modern India. Well, it's supposed to be. Ramanuja is one of the main commentators of the Upanishads, or one of the schools of the Vedanta. Acharya Shankara is the main commentator of the Advaita school. Ramanuja of the Vishishtadvaita, and Madhvacharya of the Dvaita, dualistic schools. We'll read more about them later. And so you would expect that, yes, in India, if you go, you'll find that that being the Bible of modern India, you would expect that everyone knows or has read the Upanishads. And so I thought when I went to India, but I found that no, that's not the thing. Majority of the people are still immersed in all the rituals and ceremonies and festivals and all those things without even understanding, or without even seeking to understand what are the principles behind all those things. The Hindus have the greatest respect for the Karma Kanda of the Vedas, but for all practical purposes, we know that for ages, by Shruti has been meant the Upanishads and the Upanishads alone. So there are two types of scriptures, Shrutis and anyone? Shrutis and the Smritis.
Smriti.
Yeah. Yeah. Shruti means that which you hear. So in the olden days, they're not recorded. It was not in written text. All these were transmitted by through oral tradition, through Guru Parampara. The students would be trained, tremendous memory capacity would be there, and they would learn the whole of the Vedas. And if they learned one of the Vedas, okay, if they learn two of the Vedas, then they will be given a title Dvivedi. If they could memorize three of the Vedas, Trivedi. If all the four Vedas, then Chaturvedi. Such were those titles given to recognize how much proficiency they had. Nowadays, of course, the people have the same names there, but they don't even know any of one of the even the Vedas there. In Kali Yuga, that's what has happened. So, yeah, so there are two scriptures, two sections. The Shrutis are the Upanishads, and Smritis are like Manusmriti. If they're like code that is there, how about a society should run. And so in Manusmriti, he lays down the rules, what we'll call in the modern age our traditions and our constitution, even in how the society should function, what are the laws that govern everything, and how mankind should live in harmony with all that. So probably you'd say the Smriti part of it is like these laws and rules and constitution in the modern age. The Shrutis were the eternal truths. The Smritis keep on changing. So as time goes, the Smritis are flexible. They adjust and adapt. And the Shrutis always remain same permanently. That's why it's called Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan means eternal truths. By that, Sanatan means not the rituals and ceremonies. No, they will keep on changing. Uh, the Shrutis are the Vedanta, the to do with the divine nature of man and the spiritual reality behind the universe. So, and they are the authority, ultimate authority. We know that all our great philosophers, whether Vyasa, Patanjali, or Gautama, and even the father of all philosophy, the great Kapila himself, whenever they wanted an authority for whatever they wrote, so these are the great philosophers. Vyasa Sutra is the Vedanta Sutra. Patanjali is Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And Kapila is the author of the one who put together the Sankhya philosophy. So they were great writers, and whenever they wanted an authority for what they wrote, every one of them found it in the Upanishads and nowhere else. For therein are the truths that remain forever. Eternal truths are there. So you'll find that in different times, in different countries, the Smritis keep on changing. your rituals and ceremonies according to the capacity of the people, or but the Shrutis are the eternal principles, and by Vedanta we mean those eternal truths there. Okay, let me know if you have any questions at any point. So, there are truths that are only true only for a certain line, in a certain direction, under certain circumstances, and for certain times. Those are founded on the institutions of the times. So you'll find that in a particular age and time, as the society is evolving and growing, those what you call relative truths that are relative to the time are not relevant anymore. And they begin to become shackles for the society. And at those times, these great teachers, the incarnations, and the rishis, they come and they take those eternal truths again and present them, remove all those limitations that were there, incrustations that had been collected over time, and purify, give the pure form of the truths again, relevant to every that age and time. And India has been one of those countries where there have been always these great teachers coming. Acharya Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhvacharya, then so many other saints and sages, incarnations like Ramakrishna, sages like Vivekananda, others, they come. It's a very unique country where it's not like just, in the Western world, if you look at Christianity, Christ came and he taught certain things, and after so many decades or hundreds of years, uh, some of those teachings were compiled and it became a Bible, and that's dependent on how accurately it was recorded, and that's it. And then, but in India, the sages came again and again, realized the truths, and stated them again as relevant to the needs of the people at that time. Then, so that is the first part is the Smriti part of it. Then there are the second one is the other truths which are based on the nature of man himself, and which must endure so long a man himself endures. See, the Vedanta doesn't depend on the reality of some god or some being out there. It always, the Vedantic teachings or truths came through an inward search, not an outward search, not some being, Father in heaven, or some great controller, Ishvara out there. They always, it was started, the whole pursuit was inwards, and what they realized within themselves when they dive deep within as a pure consciousness, and when the mind came down, they again saw that same consciousness is everywhere in everyone. So that the most wonderful thing, the most universal nature of it, why Vedanta is so should appeal to everyone, is that it's the truth of our own selves, each and every one of us. These are the truths that alone can be universal, and in spite of all the changes that have come to India, as to our social surroundings, our methods of dress, our manner of eating, our modes of worship, these universal truths of the Shrutis, the marvelous Vedantic ideas, stand out in their own sublimity, immovable, unvanquishable, deathless, and immortal. So that is the gist of what we are trying to understand or read and understand by Vedanta. Yet the gems of the ideas that were developed in the Upanishads had been taught already in the Karma Kanda. So gems means it was a journey, that which was like a small plant growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and ultimately a huge tree comes. But the tree is just the small sapling that has grown now. Likewise, the ideas were there and they were evolved, were developed, polished, they dive deeper and deeper and deeper. It's like, looking at something through a microscope with a low power of magnification. Then you increase the power of magnification, and the same thing reveals itself with more clarity and more detail, and you keep on doing that. The thing itself is not changing, but the tool, which is the mind of the meditator or the seeker, that is getting enhanced and more powerful, and the reality keeps on revealing itself more and more and more. So, so these ideas were started in the Karma Kanda, and then it kept on developing and culminated in the Vedanta or the Upanishads. The idea of the cosmos, which all sects of Vedantists have taken for granted, the psychology, which has formed the common basis of all Indian schools of thought, uh, seen in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, had been there, had been worked out already and presented before the world. A few words, therefore, about the Karma Kanda are necessary before we can begin the spiritual portion, the Vedanta. And first of all, I should like to explain the sense in which I use the word Vedanta. So, different people mean different things when they use the word Vedanta, and Swamiji wants to clarify that. He says, unfortunately, there is a mistaken notion in modern India that the word Vedanta has reference only to the Advaita system. Many times people come and say, Swamiji, I want to study Vedanta, but they mean Advaita in their mind. And there is a special lecture by Swami Vivekananda called Vedanta in its three phases. What he's saying that, look, Dvaita, Vishishtha Advaita, and Advaita. They are different phases, and all of them constitute what is meant by the word Vedanta. Let's read. But you must always remember that in modern India, the three prasthanas are considered equally important in the study of all the systems of religion. What are these prasthanas? Systems or schools of thought or scriptures, sources of knowledge. So, one is the Vedanta Sutras or Brahma Sutras. The second is the Upanishads, and the third is the Bhagavad Gita. Three of them, Prasthana Trayas. So, first of all, there are the revelations, the Shrutis, the Upanishads, by which I mean the Upanishads. Secondly, among our philosophies, the Sutras of Vyasa have the greatest prominence on account of them being the consummation of all the preceding systems of philosophy. So there have been so many schools of philosophies that were building and building and building, and ultimately, Bhagavan Vyasa, he composed together what is called the Vedanta Sutras or Brahma Sutras. And that is a very important text. These systems are not contradictory to one another, but one is based on another, and there is a gradual unfolding of the theme which culminates in the Sutras of the Vyasa. Then, between the Upanishads and the Sutras, which are the systematizing of the marvelous truths of the Vedanta, comes in the Bhagavad Gita, the divine commentary of the Vedanta, which is a portion actually of the Mahabharata. So these are the three important scriptures, the Prasthanatrayas. What are they? The Vedanta Sutras, which is the Shrutis, uh, the Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita. Yes, Shamain.
Oh, yes, Swamiji. The Sutras of Vyasa, how are they? Can you expand on that? I'm not sure where they come in.
Okay, so
And then the Sutras of Vyasa, are they part of the Upanishads?
no. So Upanishads are called, look here Swamiji says, the revelations. Okay, these were actually the actual experiences. Imagine these Vedic sages are there in the forests and they're not talking, they're not discussing, they're just all very quiet and diving deep within themselves and having different experiences. And when they come out of there, they try in the best language to narrate that. So there's no explanation where it is coming, there's no logic in there, it's just simple revelation of their experiences. These are the Upanishads. So when a lot of that revelations came, different people were just like, modern day scientists are, researching, and then they share that knowledge with the scientific community. And at some point, some people will say, hey, let's all put together in some logical way, so that it's systematically, it can be now studied or something. And that's what Bhagavan Vedvyasa, he did that. So he systematized it. He systematized all the teachings in a very logical way, and that systematic compilation is called Sutras of Vyasa or Vedanta Sutras or Brahma Sutras. So it's a philosophy. The first were just realizations and experiences. Now somebody has tried to philosophize it and put it in a logical way. Okay, so you got the difference between the Upanishads and the
Thank you,
and
Swamiji.
and then Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he comes in a more beautiful way, in a very practical way, in the battlefield of the Mahabharata, to his student Arjuna, creating the situation, and he puts that whole thing again, but in a more practical way with all the yogas there. So you got your bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, and karma yoga, and all beautiful, harmonized to be applied in our everyday life wherever we are. So these three are the main scriptures of the Hindus. All right. So what do we mean by the word Vedanta? Okay. So the Upanishads, the Vyasa Sutras, and the Bhagavad Gita, therefore, have been taken up by every sect in India that wants to claim authority for orthodoxy. So anyone wants to establish a school of philosophy, say I'm an original thinker, going to give to mankind a new path to self-realization or God realization. They will only be taken seriously if they go to these three scriptures, okay, the Upanishads and the Vyasa Sutras and the Gita, and write a commentary which has to be different from what anyone else written. Otherwise, you're repeating it and say, "Hey, I've got something different here. I'm our original thinker." Okay, if he can do that, only then people will take them seriously. Otherwise, no one will even pay attention to them there. So, therefore, they have been taken up by every sect in India that wants to claim authority for orthodoxy, whether they are the dualists or Vishishtadvaitis or Advaitis. The authorities of each of these are the three prasthanas. We find that Shankaracharya or Ramanuja or Madhvacharya, okay, Advaita, Vishishtadvaita, Dvaita, or Vallabhacharya, or even Chaitanya Deva, recently, more recent one in Bengal. Anyone who wanted to propound a new sect had to take up these three systems and write only a new commentary on them. Therefore, it would be wrong to confine the word Vedanta only to one system which has risen out of the Upanishads, meaning Advaita. All these are covered by the word Vedanta. The Advaitist has as much right to be called a Vedantist as an Advaitist. In fact, I will go a little further and say that what we really mean by the word Hindu is really the same as Vedantists. I want you to note that these three systems have been current in India almost from time immemorial. It's not that like, oh, we started with Dvaita and then we evolved into Vishishtadvaita and finally we came into Advaita. No, they have been there all the time. For you must not believe that Shankaracharya was the inventor of the Advaita system. It existed ages before Shankara was born. He was one of the last representatives. So with the Vishishtadvaita system, it had existed before Ramanuja appeared, as we already know from the commentaries he had written. And so with the Advaitis, dualistic system that have existed side by side with the others. And with my little knowledge, I have come to the conclusion that they do not contradict each other. It's not that one is right and one is wrong. They are just different perspectives of the same truth. And one is not black and white. It's just that, like a house can be seen from four directions. Each one will show a different, have a different presentation, yet it's the same house. Likewise, the truth of man, which is the Atman, when it's approached through different paths, then the teachers call them by different names. Whether it's Dvaita, which is Advaita, Advaita, and what is best, which is the best one? depending on the temperament of the person, whichever is will lead him forward. That means how his mind is, how mind is constituted. That would be the path they should take. So, so where did this word Hindu come from? Okay, this word that we nowadays we say Hindus. Well, this is a pretty recent word. Recent means couple of centuries old. When the and this Westerners, probably the Greeks, Alexander and others, when they came and saw this river Indus, and people who lived on the bank of the river Indus. So in the residents of the people on the banks of the river Indus, probably he called them Indus. Then somewhere the word got changed around and it became Hindus. And then the word Hindustan came and all those type of things came. But initially the country was called Bharat, and and we would have been calling ourselves Vedantists. So truly, we are all Vedantists in a general sense, and that doesn't mean that only those who were born in India. No, no. Anyone who is searching for the truth within themselves, uh, the ultimate divine truth, is a Vedantist for that matter. Now, yes, Shaman.
Thank you, Swamiji. Is that why the Ramakrishna tradition can draw on Shankya as well as Advaita teachings?
So Sankhya is a philosophy. Advaita, Sankhya philosophy is the precursor to the Vedanta philosophy. So in Sankhya, it's like it talks about the cosmology, these 24 cosmic principles we talked about. And with a few little more modifications, becomes a philosophy of the Vedanta. Advaita, Shaman, is a school of thought. Okay. But all of them use Sankhya as the basis. So they say the 5 gross elements, then the 5 tanmatras, and the 5 organs of action, and the 5 organs of senses. So these 5 times 4 is 20, then mana, buddhi, ahankara. So 3 of that, and prakriti. That becomes 24. That classification of this whole universe from the gross to the subtle is what is called the Sankhya philosophy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so all of them, whether it's Advaita, Advaita, all of them are, when they try to give it as a rational philosophy. When I use the word philosophy, it's like a very logical, systematic presentation in a scientific way. We show how the ideas are evolving and interrelating. That's what the philosophers came and did afterwards. They realize, the people who realize the truth, they just had their different experiences. Like Sri Ramakrishna, he just realized those truths. Later on, when he narrated those truths to people around them, say, oh, this is telling with that, this is telling with that, that's written in the Upanishads. They said, oh, that's interesting. But he himself never studied the philosophy. So first it was a revelation, others come and try to explain it logically. And most of the people who had the revelation, they never bother to tell anyone. Okay, they had the realization and they simply disappear and go. Only a few come around to tell, and then others try to philosophize it. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, just as in the case of the 6 darshanas, darshanas are the 6 philosophies, we find that there are a gradual unfolding of the grand principles. So it's like, something building up, tempo is building up, it's evolving. Grand principles whose music, beginning far back in the soft low notes, ends in the triumphant blast of the Advaita, which says, I am the being, Aham Brahmasmi. That doesn't mean the body is Brahman or the mind or the individuality or the personality. No, the reality behind all this, the ocean behind the wave, is that reality. That way. So also in these three systems, we find the gradual working up of the human mind towards higher and higher ideals. Still, there, everything is merged in that wonderful unity, which is reached in the Advaita system. Therefore, these three are not contradictory. On the other hand, I'm bound to tell you that this has been a mistake committed not by a few. So Swamiji has, taken pains to explain this because many a time when a commentator writes a commentary from his perspective, then he wants to claim that his is the highest and the best. And another one comes and he says, mine is the highest and the best. This is the truest one. And that's where they begin to quarrel among themselves. But Swamiji says, no, no, that's not the way it should be. Because they're going and making commentary on the same three scriptures, Brahma Sutras, Vyasa Sutras, Bhagavad Gita, and Upanishads. And when you look at the contents of the shlokas in the sutras, not every sutra or every verse is about Advaita. Not everyone is about Dvaita, or not everyone is about Visishtha Dvaita. The problem, like Swamiji will tell here, is that when a Advaitin wants to write a commentary, then he tries to forcefully interpret all the sutras from the Advaitic point of view. Sometimes, that which is very blatantly dualistic, he tries to give a Advaitic spin to it. And another one who is try to take, say, the Advaita verse perspective, he takes some Advaitic text and he tries to put a Dvaita point of view. And sometimes is very visibly that, hey, you're just stretching it out a bit too much. So Swamiji says, that is not how it should be. Let's read this. Therefore, these three are not contradictory. On the other hand, I'm bound to tell you that this has been a mistake committed by not a few. We find that an Advaitist teacher keeps intact those texts which specially teach Advaitism and tries to interpret the dualistic or the qualified non-dualistic into his own meaning. Similarly, we find the dualistic teacher is trying to read the dualistic meaning into Advaitic texts. So, Swamiji says, hey, look, our gurus were great men, yet there is a saying, even the faults of guru must be told. I'm of the opinion that in this only they were mistaken. A bit got carried away trying to establish their own school, so to say. We need not go into text torturing. We need not go into any sort of religious dishonesty. We need not go into any sort of grammatical twaddle. We need not go about trying to put our own ideas into texts which were never meant for them. But the work is plain and becomes easier once you understand the marvelous doctrine of Adhikara Bheda. Okay, why are they trying to do this? Trying to put everyone in the same jacket? That is the problem. And so Swamiji says, look, there is a principle or doctrine called Adhikar Bheda, which we'll discuss a little here. I'll explain now. Once that is understood, then everything falls in place. So what is Adhikara? Adhikari means uh, you are competent for something. That means you have the capacity to understand something. You have trained yourself, you have developed those faculties through your meditation. And now, when that particular knowledge is given to you, very easily and naturally, you'd be able to utilize and benefit from it. It is like studying mathematics. A primary school student, a high school student, and a university student, they're all studying mathematics. But the textbook for the primary school and the secondary and the university students won't be the same. And if you swap them around and try to get, say all of you study the same book, uh, the primary school student won't be able to make any sense of the university textbook because he hasn't developed that competency for it. He has to go through all the stages, passing step by step, evolving himself through all this study every year, and then he will have the fundamentals and the basics to understand the advanced calculus and trigonometry, all that. So our spiritual teachers understood that in this school of spirituality, not all the students belong to the same class. Different people are in the different stages of spiritual evolution. Some people will require uh, some solid, concrete supports, and they need the rituals and the ceremonies and the temple and the idol and the statue and the chanting of the mantras and all those type of things, because they are in there just like a child is in the kindergarten. He is in requires a slate and a chalk and a duster or something when he's writing numbers, numerals and alphabets. But as they develop that capacity, he can, drop uh, the use of the blackboard and say I can go into a give me a piece of paper, but let that be lines should be ruled, and please give me a pencil and an eraser so that if I make a mistake will correct myself there. So and when he does that nicely, then he's given a pen, where he doesn't make mistakes, and a piece of paper that doesn't have lines to guide him. He is able to write beautifully. So likewise, in the school of spirituality, if you want to say, there are people who are in the, very comfortable and happy with the dualistic, and that's necessary for them, and let them use that and outgrow. While another person who might be an old soul, naturally more evolved in that cell, he has completed those lessons in the previous years of his lives of his education, and so they are able to benefit from something which might be at a philosophical level. So this doctrine of saying what is our competency for any particular which classroom should I go to, which primary, secondary, or university I should go to, that is dependent on this competency or adhikar veda. And so in the olden days, spirituality was never taught like this, where you are preaching out to large number of people who do not know. Spiritual seekers would go out and seek a teacher and show that they are very, very serious about it. And yeah, somebody is scribbling around there. Yeah. So, and then the teachers, once understand the temperament and the mind of the students, then they will give them those teachings which would be relevant to them. And basically, they will hold their hand and guide them through. That's a sure short way of reaching the truth, or making good progress, rather than saying, since available in our this age where you can go to a bookshop and find all the books are there, and whether it's Astavakra Samhita or this or that, and somebody says, oh, I like Vedanta and this and that, and they, of course, no one is stopping them from reading, but you can read, you can, whether you'll be benefited by that, we do not know. So that is the problem with this modern age, uh, uh, how we are approaching spirituality, and sometimes people get caught. They take like your primary school student sitting with a university calculus textbook, and he thinks, and he loves that he will be able to understand. A lot of time is spent out sometimes there. So I think we have come to our 1 hour. Are there any questions? Not, then we will start from here in the next class. This is one of the lines, so please read this. This is from the Mundaka Upanishad. It starts with a question. What is that? Kasminno bhagavo vijnate sarvamidam vijnatam bhavati iti. Student goes to a teacher and asks this question. What is the question? He says, what is that by knowing which I can know everything? See, we normally know one thing at a time. We say biology and chemistry and this, and there's so many things still to know. So there is this seeker of truth and says, hey, I've spent so much time studying all the philosophies and this and that, but there's always something more to be known. Then he asks this thinking, is there something, if I know that with the help of that, I can know everything? So he goes, it's a very intelligent question. And he goes and asks the teacher and says, what is that? Oh, what is that by knowing which? Sarvamidam, all this, vijnatam. I can get to know all this. And so that is the spirit of the Upanishads. We will take that up in the next class. So please log into the course, read through this, make some notes, and have some questions. It will be nice to have more discussions, showing that you have taken some trouble to unravel and understand these things on your own, and some questions have popped up in your mind, and rather than me trying to explain everything, then I can try to focus on those questions that you might have. We will take this up in the next Thursday class. Om Asato Ma Smritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tassat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.